Welcome back to the Health Bridge. Dr. Pedram here with Dr. Tami. Hi.
Hi there.
And we have Dr. Katherine Zagone visiting us in studio today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine, specializing in fertility. This is an awesome subject because it is on the rise. I mean, so many people are having problems with fertility now. It's kind of scary. So, I mean, we've been talking kind of offline about this. I mentioned a lot of this in the Origins movie about all the stuff in our environment that might be causing this. How did you get into fertility? Like, what sparked you into this corner of the universe?
That's a great question. So when I was doing my undergrad in Illinois, I lived with my aunt and uncle, and they were on the infertility journey. They did multiple rounds of IVF, spent tons of money, lots of pain, agony, and I got to see the entire journey. And knowing I was going into naturopathic medicine, I just knew that there had to be a better way. Like there had to be something else that we were missing with nature. That like pumping my aunt full of hormones and making her like crazy and crying one, it wasn't working, and two, I just knew there was something else. And so as I got into school, I started doing more research. I focused my internships on preconception, on fertility, on women's health. And really, it's just been like the love of my life since then.
And there's so much need.
Yes, absolutely. So what's interesting is, we typically think that as women get older, our fertility decreases, and that's true. However, what we've been seeing in the statistics is that our infertility rates are rising across all age groups. So even, the 18 to 24-year-olds who should be able to pop out babies like that, the rates are still increasing, which is really, really scary. Like, why are our youngest, most vital, fertile, healthiest beings not able to reproduce? Right. And I see fertility and infertility not as its own diagnosis. Fertility is actually a byproduct of simply being healthy. So when our bodies are healthy, the species wants to reproduce. Like, we have the drive, obviously. Like, everything in our body wants to make a baby. So what is going on in our world that's stopping that these days?
So let's, for the record, just define infertility so that we have something to work off of, and let's start digging.
Yeah, so infertility is defined as when a couple has tried to conceive for 1 year and has not been successful. As women age, that time frame actually goes down to 6 months, unfortunately, but that's the official diagnostic definition.
So hormones have a lot to do with this and other things, and I am so excited because hormones are my passion. And I deal a lot with hormones as they're leaving the body, but fertility is all about that hormone soup, that optimization. So can you share with us some of your thoughts about what are you seeing in the imbalance of hormones with regard to fertility?
Absolutely. So we have the diagnosable hormone conditions like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and we know what to do with those to some degree. We're also seeing kind of like a suboptimal hormone imbalance where things might not really show up on labs, but the woman might be having symptoms like painful periods, irregular periods, mood swings, things that tell us that the hormones are off. And so we want to look at a couple of things: production of hormones and elimination of hormones, how they're getting out of the body, because you really need a balance. You want to make the right amount and eliminate the right amount. For example, like with endometriosis, we see a lot of estrogen and maybe not enough progesterone, but we also need to know, is it that it's just too much progesterone or just too much estrogen and the progesterone is okay, or is it the estrogen's okay and there's just very deficient progesterone? So we really need to see what's going on, and then we need to kind of backtrack, okay, if that's what's going on, why is that going on? Is it that we're taking something in that promotes estrogen, like plastics, like pesticides, like chemicals in our body? Is it that our body isn't able to make enough progesterone because of some issue that's going on in the ovaries? So it's really, once we have the kind of like what we would call like the diagnosis or just the suboptimal state, then it's really the detective work begins. So do you have all the nutrients to make what you need? Have you eliminated all the toxins that are clogging things up and preventing you from hitting that optimal balance? And so that's where I get to play detective.
I love this conversation because back in the day when I was doing a lot more clinical work, I'd get a lot of infertility cases because everyone heard that acupuncture helps with fertility. And
So I got pregnant.
that's how you got pregnant?
Yeah, my second baby was when I was 41.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was in medical school residency. I mean, worst
Stress.
time. Yeah, and I used acupuncture and Chinese medicine.
Wow, great.
Yeah, it's
So,
great.
yeah, no, it works.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was really bothering me is all of these poor individuals were coming in spending $10, $20, $30,000 on all of this infertility, getting Lupron shot up and IVFs and all this stuff. And no one ever stopped to say, how are you living? What have you been doing? And let's look at your environment. And I kept shaking my head saying something is fundamentally wrong with this. And so when you start being a detective in someone's life and looking at those things, I would assume you're going to look at stress levels. I'm assuming you're going to look at environmental toxins. What else are you looking at? I mean, like contraceptives. I mean, for me, it was, wow, you've been on the pill for 12 years straight and you just got off cold turkey and now you want to have a baby.
Yeah, and the pill is such an interesting thing to talk about because the research out there doesn't necessarily say that being on hormonal contraceptives for a long period of time impacts fertility. In my practice, I've seen it. And I think there's a couple of reasons. So one, we're stopping the body from ovulating. And the longer you're on it, sometimes your body is unique and is going to need more time to kind of kick back in and get things rolling. The other piece is that there's a number of people who go on the pill or some form of hormonal birth control for other symptoms. So painful periods, acne, whatever it may be. And when we're doing that, we can turn off the symptoms. We can kind of artificially balance hormones that way. But the original cause, why you had those symptoms in the first place, is still happening. So now you've been on the pill for 12 years, you're not really having symptoms, but you still have PCOS and you still have all the things that cause the PCOS because you're still eating the same way and touching the same things and breathing the same air. And so then when you get off the pill, it's like you still have the original issues, but worse because they've been building up over time.
And not being addressed at all.
Exactly.
And then the pill also increases your sex hormone binding globulin, so it's binding up your own, and that can last up to 2 years.
Absolutely.
So even if you do have adequate amounts, it's not being released, and your job is like a detective.
It is. And one more thing about the pill is that we know that it causes certain nutrient deficiencies. So it depletes folate, which is one of the most important things that you want to be really not only sufficient but like optimized in even before conception, because by the time you find out that you're pregnant, you've already kind of passed the optimal window for when that folate needs to be used for that development of that fetus. So you really need to, it's something that you want to plan ahead for. You need to get started, I would say ideally a year before you want to conceive, to make sure all of your nutrients are up to par. Body is free of toxins as much as you can be in today's world, right? And that you're dealing with your stress levels, because the stress levels are affecting the hormone balance too. Just the way we live in our world, especially as women, I don't believe that our bodies are necessarily evolved in the same way that our lifestyles have evolved. And so I think women see a lot more hormonal issues, not only because of toxins, but because we push so hard and our cortisol levels go up, and it affects our DHEA, and it affects then our estrogen progesterone balance, and the cortisol also links back to the thyroid. So there's so much interplay going on in the hormonal environment that just the stress, whether it's environmental stress, whether it's emotional stress, which I see a lot, that stress piece is absolutely huge.
Well, it's such a catch-22, because if you're trying to get pregnant, it becomes more and more stressful. You know,
Definitely.
it's hard. So what are the nutritional things that you keep speaking about? And you said there's specific hormones that you need to have specific nutrition. What are those? Can you share some of that?
Well, the general idea is that you need all of the raw ingredients to make everything your body needs to make, cofactors and like the precursors as well. And so we know that a well-balanced diet super high in antioxidants is incredibly important. And generally like a good variety of fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, lean protein, and avoiding the foods that are going to be higher in toxic burden. From a nutrient-specific perspective, the antioxidants, like I said, are key. Some of those are CoQ10, vitamin E, vitamin C. In fact, there was a beautiful study that showed vitamin C combined with Vitex was very helpful in supporting the progesterone phase for women who were struggling with that with fertility. So like two simple things that really can make quite a bit of difference.
Yeah.
How long before conception, or the intent for conception, does one have to think about this stuff? 6 months, a year? I mean, it seems like there's a whole thing of prenatal medicine and what we need to do, for our babies when they're still, inside of. but before that, like, how do you start thinking about kind of cleaning out the house and getting all your vitamins and nutrients on board and pulling off the pill and all the things that would actually set up the house and get it in order to make a baby?
Yeah, so ideally, I mean, if you can give yourself 2 years, that's the best. Because it's going to take a few months to make all the changes, and then it's going to take about a year and a half for your body to actually get everything out and build up the supplies of the nutrients, make sure all your organ systems are working optimally. Now, everybody's in a little bit different spot, so some people can shorten that a little bit. If you have a chronic disease, it's going to be quite a bit longer, because you already have to kind of like overcome what's been going on for the last decade or so in your body in order to really hit that optimal fertile spot. The minimum amount of time, I would say, would be 4 months. So if for whatever reason you just cannot wait and you are like, we have to do this now, I would say at least give yourself 4 months, because that's how long it takes from the time an egg starts to develop for ovulation and from the time a sperm starts forming until it's released from the body. So we want to make sure we're using the healthiest sperm and the healthiest eggs we possibly can. So starting a pretty strict diet, no processed foods, no trans fats, getting all the good nutrients in, cleaning out the house. So I have like a 60-point checklist for every room of the house that I go through with my patients, pulling out the plastics and the chemicals and the cleaning supplies and the insecticides.
Skincare.
Skincare is a huge one, the things we slather all over our body every day. So once all of that is done, then it's like a 4-month minimum. But ideally, you want a year and a half, because what we're finding with epigenetics is that, well, one, we know everything we eat, breathe, touch, even now we're finding like think and history of traumatic experiences affects how our genes are expressed and how those expressions are passed on to our children. So that's setting that child up for their entire lifetime of health or disease if you're not taking the time ahead of time to really prepare the body. So that's why this is so important. We can actually change an entire generation in America of health just by planning ahead for our kids.
Wow.
There's a statistic that's like, I would say, let's just go with a lowball number of 200 known chemicals found in the umbilical cord blood of a newborn kid, pretty much anywhere in like the industrialized world. That sucks. I mean, that's really starting life in a one-down position, in my opinion. It's just like, what did this poor kid do to deserve that extra burden? What can mom and dad do, if anything, to help support maybe clearing some of that? I mean, it sounds like, obviously getting it out of the house is important, but is there a detox on the front end of this? Like, is there a way to help clean up our cells so that stuff doesn't transfer through to baby?
Absolutely.
And it's not just the woman.
Right, it's both.
Yeah.
Both.
I mean, a lot of
what do we do?
It's so focused on fertility as the woman's problem, but half the genetic code comes from the man. And so that sperm can actually have a genetic code that is affected by environmental toxins and nutrition and even the epigenetics and how the stress level is, et cetera. So
absolutely.
We don't hear a lot about the men. What do you suggest for men to clear out their bodies and systems as they approach fertility?
Yeah, I'll speak to both parts. So in general with the toxins, different toxins are stored in the body in different ways. We can test for which toxins are in your body, whether it's metals, phthalates, parabens, different things. And then based on what we find, sometimes if they're fat soluble, we want to do more sweating, more lipolysis, and then support that going out through the liver, gallbladder, bile, and through the gut. If they're more water soluble, we want to support the kidneys. We can use herbs, lots of water, hydration. And I tend to customize for my patients a bit depending on what their systems look like. But there are definitely detox protocols for different chemicals, and obviously avoidance is number one. I mean, if you're continuing to put garbage in the pail, there's no way the hole at the bottom that's allowing it to seep out will ever catch up. And it's all about reducing risk. And then as far as men specifically, what we're finding is there's a few things that can affect the genetic material and the shape of the sperm and the amount of sperm. I mean, most people know about heat, boxers over briefs, avoid the hot tub and the sauna. So maybe you wouldn't be doing a sauna if you're detoxing, unless it's, your year and a half ahead of time, which is why you got to start early, right? Mm-hmm. Let those little guys reform and work their way up once they're healthy. But the other thing we're seeing is radiation, especially from cell phones. So a lot of men, and this is kind of like, do we call it a toxin or not? I don't know yet. I think as technology advances, we'll find out. But we're seeing that a lot of men, obviously carry their cell phone in that front pocket right next to where the guys are being made. And sometimes that affects the genetic material. So a lot of doctors in the natural fertility space are recommending, including myself, that men either keep their phone on airplane mode if they're keeping it in the pocket, or to put it in the back pocket, keep it off the body, because we're finding that that's actually a thing. Like technology is affecting reproduction. So
that's scary.
Yay.
It's scary. You have this.
Throw your phone away.
You have this thing that's constantly causing trouble right in your pocket, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
So we obviously got to clean up, and then in terms of diet, we hear a lot about fats and how fats will affect this. So there are good fats and bad fats. What does that do to the sperm and egg quality? How does that affect all this?
So a lot of the fats we use to make our cell membranes, which is going to be incredibly important. I mean, it's important for every cell of the body, but obviously when two cells are going to be coming together and creating a being, we need all the raw ingredients. So good fats are like omega-3 fats. There's other omegas as well. And the reason we need to consume more of those is because our body doesn't necessarily make them on our own, which is why they're called essential fatty acids. We have to eat them. And the bad fats are like the trans fats. So these artificial fats, which we actually know that trans fats increase infertility. So they're not good, as well as heart disease and other things. It all kind of goes together. And so as far as the good fats, you really want, they're also helping with hormone balance. So not only optimizing like that egg and that sperm that you're going to be getting out there, but allowing your hormones to be balanced, allowing your cells to be healthier, brain health, really optimizing you so that you can optimize the baby.
Sure. And that's a big deal, and all we have to do is just eat the right stuff on the front end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things is that, there's no neutral. What you put in your mouth actually matters, and it is good or bad. It's not neutral. So I read a study this morning kind of thinking about our interview, and it was this big aha moment that doctors are now recommending 0 alcohol during pregnancy and fertility time, getting pregnant. I was like, no, duh. Like, why is this the big aha moment?
Totally, because the French fought back for years. Not my wine. Well, and then there's that weird delicate balance where it's like your cortisol levels are so high because of stress that some people they justify a couple glasses of wine because it helps them decompress a little bit. And it's like, well, there's easier ways to unwind into your evening that don't have a toxic burden. And so it's a tough subject because we're so damn stressed out.
Yeah.
And then there's estrogen allegedly in everything, right? Like from your soap to your water bottles to your dairy. So, I mean, can you speak to that a little bit? Because it seems like we're getting
good estrogen. It's the bad stuff.
It's the nasty stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
we're getting bathed in this estrogen, which is obviously screwing up the math on the hormones.
For the men too.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. Like BPA, which is one of the commonly called xenoestrogens, environmental estrogens, is awful for men and women, has been shown to decrease sperm counts in men, and also increases reproductive birth defects in male babies. So we're seeing more and more, it's called hypospadias, where the urethra doesn't quite form the right way because of things like BPA and these estrogens that are, these baby boys are being bathed in during pregnancy. And all the cosmetics, the estrogens in the cosmetics, so as we put them on our skin as women, we're obviously going into estrogen dominance because our skin absorbs everything that we put on it.
Yeah.
And then we're eating things that are, dairy that's laden with hormones and all sorts of other things. But, because it is everywhere, we really have to be super conscious and support all of the elimination mechanisms. So the liver gallbladder system is what really helps get rid of excess estrogen. So again, first avoidance is key, and then supporting the pathways that are going to help your body get rid of the excess estrogen, and supporting the progesterone to come up and balance it out as well.
Eating, it's a thing, right? Like we should eat right.
Yeah.
I mean, you all both, you deal with female reproductive issues all the time. You deal with men reproductive issues. Do you as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't have one side without the other. It takes two to make a baby, type of thing.
Yeah.
What do we eat? I mean, is there a list you could put together that we can share maybe in a blog post here of just like what nutrients we need? I mean, can we cover the big ones and then just kind of get something that people can kind of look at and basically know that this needs to be phased into their diet if they're interested in having children?
And I love your talk about progesterone, and I'd love to hear which foods you're talking about for that specifically, because progesterone, gestation. So it's so important. A lot of times we're focusing on estrogen, but progesterone actually helps you keep that pregnancy. So that's really important too. So nutrition can affect that as well.
Definitely. So from the basics perspective, I'd be happy to put together kind of like a list that we can kind of give out to everyone. I do customization with diet. We start with the basics, and then I do food allergy panels, and we look at metabolic typing and different things so that everybody's getting exactly what they need. We also look at digestion, because you could be eating the most perfect diet in the world, but if you're not breaking it down and absorbing it, there's no point. Which is a huge thing that we're seeing today in America, where even people who are eating healthy diets are having problems because the digestive system is not able to operate well. So from a dietary perspective, I like to think of, like, if I'm looking at my plate, we're going to be doing, and again, it's more about quality, like whole foods. When you're buying meat, make sure it's 100% grass-fed, free range. All your fish needs to be completely wild, no farmed. Certain types of fish have lower mercury levels, like wild salmon, avoiding any of the higher mercury fishes. And then as far as vegetables, it's kind of like as many vegetables as you could possibly consume, like do that.
Right.
And if you think you're having enough, triple that. And I would say as many colors as you can get in a day. So I tell my patients, aim for 3 different colors. So that's not just like a green pepper, a red pepper, and a yellow pepper.
Done.
Yeah. Like you got your stoplight, you're good to go. No. That's where the antioxidants are. The fiber is, which is going to help with getting the excess estrogen out through the gut. That's where I said antioxidants. A lot of the B vitamins are. The different colors represent different types of antioxidants, and we need all of them. So that's why you want to go for the variety of colors. And cruciferous as well. So like broccoli, super great for helping balance hormones, because 1, you've got the fiber, but 2, you've got a couple of compounds in there that are really helping the liver to like conjugate the estrogen, or like break down the estrogen into a safer form and then help get it out of the body. So I think everybody should eat broccoli.
And Brussels sprouts.
And Brussels sprouts, yes. And we might as well throw kale in there, all the superfoods. And then we do have the superfoods as well. So like goji berries, which you're getting that really rich dark color, like a ton of nutrients packed into like little foods. Blueberries. There's other superfoods too, kind of like the royal jelly, that have been used for fertility for millennia in various cultures. And what's interesting is that certain cultures also have like their own fertility foods, and they tend to be more organ meats, because the body will concentrate.
Mitochondria.
Give me that juice.
That's the only thing that's passed down. It's not really, you guys aren't all that important.
But how I care for my mitochondria might be.
There you go.
Well, that's the responsibility, right? It's like, if I'm going to transfer life, then what does that mean? I got to be clean, and my energy systems have to be functioning so that the expression of my boys can be, translated through the sperm, and that's a big deal. And it's not something that we think about. We just think, okay, made a baby, I wonder why he has asthma, right? And these are the types of things that are kind of modern problems. Here's something that keeps coming up is we've been putting it off, right? Modern life has now made it way more difficult to just, marry your high school sweetheart and have a kid at 19. So we're getting pushed back into the 30s and early 40s with conception. How much of that is affecting this fertility crisis?
Well, it's common to see fertility decrease as we age, especially for women. Men, you can typically go much, much longer. However, we are seeing more birth defects with older paternal age. So higher rates of autism as dads are over 50, over 60. With women, we tend to think like, oh my God, I'm gonna hit 40 soon, like it's almost over. And that's not entirely true. So we have our chronological age, but we also have a biological age. And what's important to know is that you can actually reverse that biological age. So diet and lifestyle, we know, change how you age, which changes your fertility over time. I was just at an endocrinology conference back earlier this year. And it was the first time that the entire panel of experts agreed that if you have a woman who's trying to get pregnant, she's in her 40s, that it's actually better to take that full year, really prepare her body, and then try and get pregnant, whether it's IVF or natural, than to just go quickly because you think time is running out. So there's so much that we can do that will affect our health, which will affect our fertility, that it's not just about age anymore. And part of it, I think, is that, and what I've seen as well too, is that as we age, we have more toxin exposure. So we have a greater toxic burden that's throwing things off. If we haven't addressed nutrient deficiencies up to this point in our life, we could be incredibly deficient in things that you might not think to take, either supplement-wise or food-wise. And our food supply is more deficient these days in nutrients as well. So it's, there's a lot to think about.
And stress. I think that typically the people that are delaying it are the people who are pursuing a career. And
Definitely.
so, their stress levels are a lot higher because they've focused on this career for X amount of time. And then we get into how the love, that's, a child is the culmination of a love, of a union, and it becomes such a chore. And how does that affect fertility when it's just work? It's just this scheduled, tedious.
Get in here.
It's too 24 hours.
It's the third.
Totally.
The ovulation window.
Yes.
Yeah, it's what I've seen with my couples and in the world basically is that it not only is it a chore, but it is devastating when the woman does get her period that month and they thought that they did it. It's so devastating, which adds more stress as well. For the sex piece, nobody wants sex to be a chore. It's one of the joys of life.
And men don't think it will feel like a chore. Like they think, oh, that'll never happen to me. It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Well,
when it is scheduled and it's not because your wife is attracted to you or wanting to express, her love, it's just, you're just like a donor, kind of. That's scheduled.
And then you get
That's what they
performance
feel
anxiety,
like.
and then it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
So it's really important that couples are kind of on the journey together, that they communicate, that they support each other. I recommend intimacy activities both in and out of the bedroom. And in the bedroom, there are ways to definitely make it more fun and less stressful. And we could do a whole show on that if we wanted to.
I like that show.
It's a different show.
Health Bridge after hours.
So when do I hear this, the woman needs to get her body ready for a year. And so when do you suggest that the men get tested? Because sperm count, motility, all of that, when are men supposed to get checked as a possible contributor to the infertility path?
Well, the couple needs the year to year and a half together to prepare. As far as testing, there's a number of testing I would do right off the bat, more like micronutrient deficiencies, toxin exposure. And then once those things are taken care of, then I would consider a sperm analysis. If you're not trying for a year and a half. If someone's been trying and they're struggling and they haven't had a sperm analysis yet, it'd be one of the first things I would recommend, of course. And from there, then, if there is a morphology issue, a motility issue, I can kind of assume what nutrients might be deficient or what exposures they might have. I typically still want to test those so we can really see what we're dealing with and know exactly how to handle it.
There's a piece in here that I find very liberating, is that giving yourself the permission to have that year and a half, despite the fact that you might be 42 and are starting to get freaked out about this, takes a little bit of that stress off. It makes it more of like a joyous process, because that tick-tock, I've seen it. I've seen the eyes, the pupils of women coming into the clinic who are just like freaked out, and it's like it's a race against
next year.
It's a race against biology, and it's just like this number. It's so arbitrary, but now I have to do genetic testing and all this kind of like stressful stuff.
But
right?
let me tell you, I was in advanced maternal age, and this big old stamp is on your medical chart, and you have to go to all this extra testing, and you feel bad.
Yeah, old hag. Wait a minute, right? Like, it's not fair.
It's not
High,
fair.
Yeah.
It's not
and
fair
you're
at all.
high risk, and
Yeah.
I'm healthy, and I said, I'm not high risk. Yes, you are.
Screw
Why?
you and your
Because
numbers,
you're-
but
yes,
studies
yes.
show. So, okay, so now we have permission to say, okay, look, let's spread this out, let's detox, let's get a little bit of space in between the contraceptives and this conception. Let's clean out like the liver and the kidneys, and let's clean out the cells so that we don't have the toxins. And then, so in that period where we're having intimacy drills and having like that place where we can just kind of relax into it, what would you recommend? So when do you pull the goalie? Right? Because you obviously don't want to get pregnant in the first 3 months of that by accident, because you got some cleanup to do. So just go use traditional contraception like condoms and diaphragms, and then eventually, once you're in the safe zone, you go to, fire at will.
Yeah, so my recommendation officially is to give it a full year before you pull the goalie.
Yeah.
For couples who really kind of want to just get started, I say leave him in place for 4 months minimum, and then you guys can kind of decide from there. And let's do some testing first. Let's like retest after that 4 months and kind of see where things are. And then we can talk about what we find, and if it feels good and you guys want to go for it, then you have my blessing. I mean, you always have my blessing, but we want to give you the best, like the healthiest baby possible. So that's why we do what we do. But yeah, those are my recommendations.
Great. So contraception, if you're considering having a child, the sooner you pull off the pill, the better, is what I'm hearing. I just want to be real clear on this, and then move to the other forms of contraception, and have fun, but clean up your cells, guys and girls.
Totally. So one more thing about the pill is that a lot of women experience decreased sex drive or no sex drive because of the way it affects our hormones, and that's terrible. I mean, obviously it's so important, one, as women, that we feel sexy and want to have sex, not only for the conception part, but for like the health and happiness of our entire lives. And another piece to that is allowing yourself to really be a woman and be in your sensuality and be feminine and feel pretty and feel sexy. And I like to pull in a lot of belly dance. I'm a belly dancer.
That's sensual.
It's so sensual.
Yes.
And it was actually used for thousands of years by women to support the reproductive health and improving
Massaging
blood flow
the
and
blood flow
energy
and
then getting you into that, like the juiciness, And what's beautiful about that is it affects the man too. So you have what's called sexual polarity. And the more the woman can get into her feminine and really just receive and allow and enjoy and be in like the senses, like what does this actually feel like? That's very attractive to the man. And then he gets to play more of that masculine role. And when you have those poles, and then you come together and it's like, yes. And that moment of conception can be so conscious and sacred, where you're creating this sexual encounter, this experience together that just like moves worlds. And that's when that being is conceived.
I actually read a study that said that intercourse that ends in orgasm is more likely to be a successful conception to a live birth than otherwise.
Yes.
For the woman.
Love that. Well,
Yeah. So
and
you have to give
it's-
yourself that permission.
Totally.
Well, and by you giving yourself that permission, it gives the man that drive to be like, yum, right? And I think that's the problem. I've had a lot of friends in their late 30s and 40s trying to make babies, and it's just like, get in here, right? And it takes it away. It really does. Like, I've had friends call me and be like, dude, like, I never thought I'd say this, but I just don't want to put out. You know what I mean? Like it's changed everything because the polarity's gone. So it's you're stepping into this really sacred place. And that's what Tantra is, right? It's building this foundation of love energy and bringing life into this. It's like serious stuff.
Oh yeah.
And we're just thinking about like, you know, ovulation and temperatures and like, you know, TikTok. And it really makes it a mechanical, kind of nasty way of looking at conception. And so I love the permission to be able to get back into the juicy stuff.
I know this isn't related, but it reminds me of, you know, when you hear actresses and actors that say, you know, they had to gain 40 pounds for a role. And they started to hate eating because they weren't eating for the pleasure of the food, they were eating for a goal. And so this is not the pleasure of being together, it's a goal-oriented thing. And so that middle part that's so important is taken away. So I love that you focus on that in your clinic and that you give that permission and focus to it.
Thank you, yeah.
So for our audience, I love what Katherine's doing so much. I invited her into my clinic in Southern California because I think that this is just such a refreshing conversation. So one day a week we got her. I'm trying to get her to move here now. It's so juicy. It's so right because I've been around a lot of infertility stuff, and it's like so cerebral and so stressful that it takes the love out of the lovemaking, and it really changes the dynamics. And I see these poor couples who are just freaked out, spending money on these clinics, and these doctors are just like looking at labs and just poking and prodding and shooting them up and saying, okay, you know, come back next month. I'm sorry, that'll be another 20 grand. And it's just, it breaks my heart. And so it's just such a refreshing way that you're going about it. And
they're very holistic.
Yeah.
Yes, everything does matter.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, so thank you for doing what you do. Yeah. And so for anyone who's interested in the work that she's doing, I just email support@well.org and we'll hook you up with her. And we'll get that list of nutrients and stuff. So if you're listening to this on the podcast audio only, go to well.org and you'll see the post. And in there, we'll have a link to all of it. And that way we can help support you and bring in beautiful, healthy babies into this world. How's that?
Yay. Beautiful.
Oh,
Catherine,
thank you so much.
Yeah, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you both.
Yay.
Learned a lot. That's great.
So for all of us here at the Health Bridge, thanks for joining us. This is fun. Love us up wherever you're at. Give us comments. And if you're looking at bringing babies into the world, take this stuff to heart. It's important, and let's bring healthier kids so that we can have healthier relationships with our spouse on the front end, and then just giving our kids a fighting chance in the toxic world we live in. I think it's our responsibility.
And share. You know, you might not be struggling with fertility, but other people might be in your life. And so this kind of information isn't mainstream. I know, I'm a medical doctor. So help get the word out that there is hope, and hope without side effects in a large bill. So share with people you love, and it can really help and make a difference.
And this really is our opportunity as a planet to shift the way we're going. If we can bring these children in, this next generation, I call them like the generation of superheroes, that are so healthy, clear, clean, conscious, and loving, that they can just come and do what they're here to do, whether that's be this like loving beacon of light or go off and save the oceans or the rainforest, or, you know, there's plenty that can be done on Mother Earth
and
these
they got to
days.
take care of us. When
Exactly.
Push me around.
Recommend nursing home.
Well, that's it. To your point, it's the world, like the world I was born into. Like, you know, I didn't do anything to do that, but I had to deal with it. My son's born into a dirtier world than I was, and so it's on us to change this. And so, what do we have to do to stop this nonsense and clean up the mess of the Industrial Revolution and bring sanity back into our species and health back into our species? So I love this because it's really kind of a macro conversation that has to do with how we live, how we eat, how we pollute, and how we make love and how we interact. So it's a big topic, and thank you for doing your part to help us do this and stay healthy.
Yes.
We'll see you in the next show.